What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast, coming at you live on the YouTube channel on the Fantasyholics Podcast Network. I'm Bo. That is Brant. We're in a full swing of free agency. Got some big names that have fallen, some other big names still left to go for fantasy. Obviously, this free agent class has been more defensive players at this point, but still some decent name wide receivers. I think most of the running back market, with the exception of Nick Chubb's, kind of factored out at this point. Still got a couple of big quarterbacks left to fall, but man, there's been some exciting changes. Some teams are doing an awful lot, like your Seahawks did early, and then my Atlanta Falcons not so much. So let's kind of get into this, talk a little bit about, we'll go through the position and kind of what the contract looks like, and then what the fantasy looks like, fantasy expectations are for that player and that team for where they sit right now. Obviously, first of all, we had a huge trade after our last show that we have to discuss. We kind of alluded to it, but DK Metcalf did get traded. So if you want to walk us through how you're feeling about that.
Excuse me. As a fan, I'm okay with this going away. Fantasy standpoint, I hate it. They could barely support Pickens. They don't have a QB worth a darn on the roster. If they actually have one, I'm not even sure they do have one under contract. They're waiting, I guess, to see how the dominoes fall. Well, the dominoes are already falling. The two biggest names, in my opinion, are already off the board. And now you're waiting on, two old guys to see what happens. I hate this trade. I love this for the fan point. He's gone. We got a second round. We did a pick swap. I'm okay with it. You're seeing McDonald try to take over the team and rebuild it the way he wants. Fantasy-wise, this is not going to be good for DK. It's not going to be good for Sam Darnold as he loses an amazing target there in Seattle. Unless they get a gunslinger, how are you supporting Pickens and DK when they're kind of both field stretcher guys and both really hot-headed? You're going to get a bunch of OPIs and probably unnecessary roughnesses. And I would assume when these two get together, you're probably going to get a bunch of taunting calls coming from that. I don't like this at all. And unfortunately, I am a proud owner of both of them in our home league.
Yeah, so obviously you brought up some very interesting points, and the number one being, the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh is completely up in arms. There was, at one point it sounded like Pittsburgh was trying to go and target Brandon Ayuk at the trade deadline, and prior to the start of the season last year. We thought there was a chance that deal got done. That kind of fell through. They did get their guy in DK, and obviously they think he is the guy. They paid him handsomely afterwards. My question is this, and we'll just leave it where it is. Obviously Pittsburgh making the playoffs isn't really in a spot to draft a quarterback at the draft. Maybe they trade up to try to get it done somehow. They're picking the first and the next year's first, something. I don't know. But it's more likely it's going to be either Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. Is there any likelihood that those two potential players could make your fantasy thoughts better, I guess? Could you get more excited about DK and Pickens if it's Aaron Rodgers versus Russell Wilson?
To be honest with you, if it's Russell, I'm going to get excited because he will hit the deep ball. He's got still one of the prettiest deep balls. I know he's getting older. He still has one of the prettiest deep balls. That will make me excited. If it's Rodgers, I'm excited for Pat Freiermuth and possibly who's going to line up in the slot, because those guys are going to take away the corners and should leave the middle of the field wide open. I'm actually going to get more excited for the third pass catcher on that team. I do get a little excited if it is Russell.
Okay. All right. Let's get through the quarterback position here, and then we'll kind of talk about that. Obviously, there's a big one for you. Number one, Sam Darnold, 3 years, $100.5 million contract with the Seattle Seahawks. That was rumored, obviously, before the tampering window started. Got done pretty quickly. Justin Fields, 2 years, $40 million to the Jets. Daniel Jones, 1 year, $14 million to the Colts. There's been some others that weren't really needle movers as far as fantasy, and Mariota and Brissett. But let's focus on these three. Really, Brant, what's your thoughts on the Sam Darnold signing?
Hang on, before I get in that, I missed the Brissett. Where did Brissett go? Somehow I did miss that update.
Jacoby Brissett signed to back up. I think he's in your division, actually.
You look that up. I'll talk about Darnold. So Darnold, I absolutely love from a fan point. He did great at the play action. McDonald's going to want to run and pound the ball. I absolutely hate it fantasy-wise. he lost all of his weapons. You're going to see Zach Charbonnet take some catches. You're going to see Kenneth Walker. JSN should explode. I'm going to say it because I'm going to say it until we replace him. Jake Bobo right now is the number one guy. He filled in for DK as he left last year or got hurt last year. I'm sure he will get replaced, but I'm going to continue to use Bobo as long as I can. Fantasy-wise for Darnold, I don't really like it right now. Let's see what happens. We need to do something with the offensive line and get him some protection because obviously he's not a scrambling quarterback, so he's not going to be able to be moving all around. He's going to move just as well as Geno did. Just hopefully he can get rid of the ball a little bit quicker than Geno did.
Yeah, and so just so people at home listening don't get confused, Brant's not saying Jake Bobo is the number one wideout in Seattle. He's playing the X role.
X role. I apologize.
JSN is definitely the leader in that wide receiver room at this point. Also, you said JSN explosion. I think we kind of saw that last year. I think the only thing maybe he goes up with is touchdowns. I do think maybe Darnold's again, this is we've got to see him continue on that path he was on with Kevin O'Connell last year. Kevin O'Connell's kind of earned the rep of the quarterback whisperer in Minnesota with what he did with Dobbs and now Darnold. Even Kirk Cousins was looking really good there with him. So as long as Kirk Cousins stays on that path, I like JSN's touchdowns to go up. I think he's going to be a little bit more careful with the ball in the red zone than Geno was. Geno was a little reckless at times. So I'm excited about the red zone offense.
We added a field stretcher in MVS.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
Okay. When we get to that, I'll talk about the receiving core, how I do really feel about that. And then Justin Fields. So there's still rumors afloat about Garrett Wilson possibly being on the move. I don't see that happening with Adams moving. I'm going to probably put those rumors to bed for myself. I will say they are out there. I don't believe it at all. I love this for Fields. I have been a Fields guy. I love his scrambling ability. I love what he brings. The Bears didn't give him any protection. He did pretty good with Pittsburgh prior to Russ coming back in. I think he got benched prematurely there. I absolutely love this. I think it's going to be a good fit. I think you're going to see a resurgence of Justin Fields. You're going to get a full year. Love the fantasy upside with him. Running the play action or the RPO with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. I love this fit for him. I really do. You got two great backs there. I think this is going to be a good fit for Justin Fields.
Yeah, I like the Justin Fields fit too. I will say I want to see the Jets add some offensive line protection in the draft, but Fields did kind of get that, hey, you're our starter money, go out and earn it until it ain't you. I know there was all that smoke coming out of the New York Jets locker room that they were okay with Tyrod Taylor being the guy. That was BS from the rip. We knew that wasn't going to happen, but I am excited for Justin Fields to get another opportunity, reuniting with his his college teammate there in Garrett Wilson. I don't know if you saw it, but Chris Olave flamed and said straight fire or something on Twitter. And now there's speculation that Chris Olave is jealous. He's going to force his way out of New Orleans over there. But nonetheless, it's exciting, and it'll be a new look for the New York Jets that have kind of been that stuck in mud quarterback for a little while with Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. So it'll be interesting to get a guy that's pretty mobile back there.
Now, just don't get caught up in the preseason hype of the Jets like we have probably the past 2 years, where Garrett Wilson was supposed to blow up 2 years ago, and then he did okay. He had a very good rookie year, and then last year, Aaron Rodgers is fully healthy. We're going to have this great season, and then So let's stay out of that float. Enjoy it, but temper expectations. Don't go crazy with it as you're going into your drafts and looking at your research.
Mm-hmm. All right, real quick on Daniel Jones. I think this is a move absolutely that brings more competition to Anthony Richardson, who hasn't done near enough to prove it at this point. Daniel Jones gets potentially a chance to start fresh in his career and walk in and compete. With a quarterback who's yet to prove it, but I'm not trading for Daniel Jones. I don't expect a whole lot of fantasy relevancy here, but there's a chance he might start a few games.
That's a guy that honestly, if I'm starting a startup or anything like that, maybe I'm snagging him at the end of my draft as my second quarterback or my third quarterback. I'm a little interested in it. I do think that he has a good shot of beating out Anthony Richardson. You have a great setup there. You got a good offensive line. You got a great running back. You got a decent receiving core there. I don't want to say it's going to stretch the needle or turn it up for any QB, But this is a good chance for Daniel Jones, and I do think that there's a good shot that he could win this out. Barring injury, could be the QB to start the season for the Colts. And so I think I would take a late flyer. I'm not going to go throw any picks out at him and go try to trade for him or anything, but I think I would take a late flyer on him.
I'm absolutely rostering. If I get Anthony Richardson in a startup, I don't know if I want him on my clogging up my roster. If not, but I understand the sentiment. All right, moving on to the running back position. Right before the tampering window opened, Aaron Jones signed a 2-year, $20 million extension with the Vikings. Najee Harris, $1.525 million with the Chargers. Javonte Williams, $1.3 million, or excuse me, 1 year, $3 million for the Chargers. Or Cowboys, excuse me, tripping over my C's here. Elijah Mitchell, 1 year, $3.5 million for the Chiefs. Samaje Perine back to the Bengals on a 2-year, $3.6 million contract. Ty Johnson to the Buffalo Bills on a 2-year, $5 million contract. And Rico Dowdle happening later today, 1 year, $3 million to the Carolina Panthers, Brant.
Yeah, I absolutely love the first two there, or not the first two. We alluded on Jones on what we thought about that and how we both think that he's going to stay in Minnesota and do it would still be fantasy relevant. I absolutely love the opportunity for Najee. You're going into a run-heavy offense. They're with the Chargers with Harbaugh. You're going to get pounded. Everything else is gone. I think Vidal is left, and that's it. They cut Gus Edwards. I love this fit for Najee to try to resubmit himself in the top 10 running backs of fantasy. He's gone over 1,000 yards, all-purpose yards every year in his career, I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe he's been over 1,000 yards. He's shown that he can carry the ball. I love this. Williams, as long as they don't add a pick, there's nobody else in that backfield that's going to compete with him. He was a stud coming out of college. He's got to prove it. I love that fit in Dallas as well, as long as they're not going out there adding a first-round draft pick.
Yeah, so on the Najee sentiment, I agree. John Harbaugh wants to run the ball. He likes to pound it. Got to, honestly, probably a dream marriage for Najee Harris and John Harbaugh. Both going to be, or excuse me, Jim Harbaugh, both going to be, looking to have big run games this year. I like it a lot. Najee Harris also catches the ball pretty well out of the backfield for a bigger guy. So I like that for Herbert as well. On the Javonte one, I'm less than enthused. I think Javonte is not, or a former shell of himself. I'm more interested in one that we haven't brought up yet, in Elijah Mitchell to the Chiefs. Obviously, I know it's going to be Pacheco. But even down the stretch last year, they were mixing in a healthy amount of Kareem Hunt, all the way even up into the Super Bowl. So I'd be excited to see if Elijah Mitchell could potentially carve out like a 35-40% stake in that Chiefs backfield, get himself into some fantasy relevancy. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, Brant, people were trading first-round draft picks in dynasty leagues for Elijah Mitchell. So definitely be interesting to see. No, all jokes aside, I really do think Elijah Mitchell has a chance to carve out a role for himself here. I would have rather seen Elijah Mitchell go someplace like a Dallas or, even a Pittsburgh that doesn't have a running back yet. Obviously, these guys can only go where their contracts are offered, but someplace where he could have competed with somebody lesser of Pacheco, I think I'd be more excited. But I like Elijah Mitchell.
I do too. I love that fit there in Kansas City. Unfortunately, I think I gave up Mitchell halfway through the year, so I don't even get that opportunity to enjoy it after I did give up the first round pick for him. But all in all,
to be fair, that was 2 weeks before the CMC trade. So
yes.
Speaking of the CMC trade where he left the Carolina Panthers, what is your thoughts on Rico Dowdle signing a very similar contract to Javonte Williams to play with the Panthers?
That's Chuba Hubbard all day still there. They're just bringing something else in. They're signing a 1-year deal because Brooks is going to be out all year. So I think it's just a backup deal there. I think it's still Chuba Hubbard's backfield.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if you thought Rico did enough to maybe give himself a chance to compete. I think it's Chuba obviously as well. You know how big of a Chuba fan I was in college at Oklahoma State, but I just didn't know if you thought there was a chance he could carve out, even a small percentage of this backfield. But all right, let's move into the wide receivers. There's some names here I'm more excited about than others, obviously. and also still some pretty big names out there waiting to fall on Cooper and Diggs, and Cooper Kupp now was released today. So some bigger dominoes still left to fall in the wide receiver room, but let's get started off with it. Chris Godwin stayed in Tampa Bay on a 3-year, $66 million contract. Devontae Adams looks to take Cooper Kupp's spot, 2 years, $46 million with the Rams. DeAndre Hopkins, 1 year, $5 million with the Ravens. Marquise Hollywood Brown, 1 year for $11 million back to the Chiefs. Joshua Palmer, 3 years, $36 million to go play with the Buffalo Bills. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 1 year, $5.5 million with your Seattle Seahawks. Nick Westbrook-Akine, 1 year, $6.5 million with the Dolphins. And Dwami Brown, 1 year, $10 million with the Jaguars, Brant.
Yeah, MVS, he gets to reunite there in Seattle with Kubiak. They cross paths down in New Orleans. So I don't see a huge role for him. Godwin, we spoke of. We absolutely, he's back to where he belongs. That scares me on McMillan now. It scares me off of McMillan a little bit more with Godwin being healthy.
I did want to mention too. I forgot Darius Slayton re-signed with the Giants, 3 years, $36 million on that one.
Need a quarterback on the roster, and then I can talk a little more about that. He threw me. Oh, Josh Palmer there in Buffalo. I absolutely love this. You get yourself a field stretcher with one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the NFL. I absolutely love this fit. This is a guy that's going to fly off of fantasy radars. I still think he's probably number 2 to Shakir. Yes, Shakir. So I do still think he'll be number 2 there, and then you still have James Cook and then Josh Allen running the ball. I think he'll have some good fantasy value. I think he'll have some breakout games. I do love the fit, though.
So you have Palmer over Keon Coleman at this point?
Yeah, just right now. Okay. I think Coleman could pass him. Still a little iffy on him. I do think he could pass him in the depth chart, but I do think I like Palmer. I think that's why they reached out, because they weren't completely sold on Coleman yet.
Okay, I think on 3 wide receiver sets, those guys are probably still all out on the field together. And there's plenty of love with Josh Allen and his big contract to get the ball around to all of those guys. I can't believe you didn't bring it up after we talked about it at work, Brant. My favorite, Dwami Brown, 1 year, $10 million to the Jags. Right now, he's competing with Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis, who's good for 1 quarter of football every other game.
Yeah, Dwami's going to be a sneaky little draft pick. He'll probably sneak into my sleeper talks later this year, minus unless they add a big name. But I love this signing. He showed himself. He showed what he could do. I was extremely excited to see him come out of college. When he did, he didn't quite live up to expectations there in Washington. He did have a good playoff run with them. I expect Dwami Brown to really take over some of that over the middle type role of Evan Ingram's leaving on the field there. And Christian Kirk, he'll be a good slot receiver. And we saw what Trevor Lawrence can do with a good slot receiver with the first year of Christian Kirk. And then BTJ running in the slot last year quite a bit too. So I think this will be a good fit for him. Okay.
Thoughts on Nick Westbrook-Akine to the Dolphins? I liked him a lot in Tennessee. Sneaky, low-end flex appeal some weeks with the Titans. You think can he get on the field, carve out any role with the 2 wide receivers they already have in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle?
It would be tough. We saw a lot of injuries between those two, so he's definitely a guy that if I own one of those, I'm probably holding him on my roster. Because I do think he'll carve out himself a small little role. We saw some guys, as both of those guys got hurt, we did see some guys take off game in and game out for the Dolphins. I think he will have some flex appeal. If they're both healthy, he will be one of the hardest guys to ever have to start.
Okay. All right. And then lastly, we didn't talk about either of these two, but Marquise Hollywood Brown back to the Chiefs, with more illegal off-field issues. With the wide receivers, Xavier Worthy news came out, and the Chiefs are like, okay, wait a minute, we can't let this guy leave town. And then DeAndre Hopkins to the Ravens. Either of those do anything for you?
No. Hopkins just played with the best quarterback that he has ever played with, and really had compared to what Hopkins can do and what we've seen, it was an abysmal season for him. It doesn't move the needle at all. I do think that we're going to see Lamar he had a very good passing year this year. I It's not moving the needle. It's another wide out there in Baltimore that you're not sure what's going to happen. It could be Rashad Bateman for 5 games, DeAndre Hopkins for 3, and then Mark Andrews decides I'm going to show up the last 4 weeks of the season.
What about Zay Flowers? He doesn't get any love?
Zay. I think he's going to be fine. It's just you're not sure who the second one's going to be.
Okay. All right.
This could actually.
I got to check you when you leave him off.
Honestly, I did leave him off, but this could open up a lot more routes for him because you have that Bateman, big body, and Hopkins on the outside. So you're giving Zay a lot more freedom. This could open up quite a few lanes for Zay.
I like it for Zay too. All right. Last but not least, fantasy relevant wise, let's talk about the tight end position. Juwan Johnson got a reward for having his career year last year. 3 years, $30.75 million to stay with the New Orleans Saints. Mike Gesicki, 3 years, $25.5 million to stay with the Bengals. Zach Ertz gets a 1 year, $6.25 million extension with the Commanders. Austin Hooper back with the Patriots on a 1 year, $5 million deal. And the biggest change in the tight end world at this point, Evan Ingram, 2 years, $23 million to go play with the Denver Broncos brand.
I love the Evan Ingram there. I like that for his role. Judy was out the door. They were searching for a true number 1 there. Sutton had his games there. I love Evan Ingram there. Big body guy. Hooper's going to do about the same he did last year. Gesicki's a real good question mark because has he signed? He hasn't signed the franchise tag, has he? They just tagged him, right? Has Higgins signed? I
don't believe Higgins is signed yet.
Yeah. So you could still see Higgins out the door. There's still those question marks there. Gesicki's a good fit. And then I know I'm missing one more I wanted to talk about. Who was the first one you said?
Juwan Johnson.
That's going to be an interesting one because a lot of his came when everybody got hurt last year. Because if you remember, I mean, they were running MVS as their number 1 guy and couldn't move the ball to save their lives. And it was only him able to catch the ball consistently. So Chris Olave comes back. It could open up some more for him. So that's an interesting one there too.
Okay. Yeah. Evan Ingram's my favorite one out of this. I think, he's already a top 10 tight end in my opinion when he was in Jacksonville, just based on, volume and things of that nature. And I kind of look for him to keep that up because really, if you look at the Denver Broncos and what makes them successful, it was Bo Nix spread the ball around an awful lot. There wasn't a true alpha. Not saying that necessarily happens with Evan Ingram, but I could see him becoming a go-to guy for Bo Nix as he goes into his second year. I definitely like the Evan Ingram move for fantasy relevancy. So, okay, Brant, everything on the table, all cards are out there. Who is, and I know this is silly to say, who is your off-season fantasy winner to this point? You kind of know who mine is because I talked about it a little bit to you in person, and I'm going to bring it up here in a minute. And I don't necessarily mind if you jump on the bandwagon with me with that one, but just curious who you've got as your guy.
I think I'm going to go with Najee. I think Najee's the biggest winner with this free agency. I like his spot. I like what he's bringing. There's not a whole lot there to compete with. I think Najee right now is the biggest winner.
Okay. I'm going to go out a little bit here and say whoever the heck is taking handoffs in Chicago from Caleb Williams is a big winner because that offensive line got beefed up this offseason, trading for Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman, just really retooled that offensive line. They were one of the worst in football last year. They've beefed it up. Ben Johnson's come through and made trenches a priority, and boy, has he done it quickly and hard. And I also think Caleb Williams is a winner from fantasy perspectives this offseason. I'd like to see them re-add Keenan Allen, who was kind of somebody he looked for a decent amount last year. I know Rome probably takes a step forward, and Keenan's taking a step back anyway with his age, but one more year of that pairing I think would help with the development of Caleb Williams. But I think from a fantasy point, we may see a sophomore surge from Caleb Williams rather than a sophomore slump this year. So I think those Chicago Bears skill position players are big winners based on what Ben Johnson has made a priority for the Chicago Bears and trenches. And I will also add, Brant, one of our good buddies at work, he has told me the Chicago Bears, you can crown them. They are off-season champions. which never gets old hearing that from Chicago Bears fans in Illinois as they go on to finish third in their division again. NFC North is going to be excuse my language, a damn good division for many, many years to come. A lot of youth at the quarterback positions. We'll see if J.J. McCarthy can put it together and keep the Vikings in it. It could be one of the best divisions in football for several seasons, Brand.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to beat the crap out of each other all year and then be so hurt in the playoffs. They're going to end up folding in the playoffs. I mean, Detroit, had probably the best team on paper on both sides of the ball and the coaching staff, but they got so beat up. That is going to be one tough division. You're going to have to be out there banging on each other all season in order to get through that division.
By the way, I didn't get a chance to re-say it. Jacoby Brissett did go to your division. He went to the Arizona Cardinals to back up Kyler Murray.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. So obviously still some big names out there to follow or to fall. Stay up with Fantasy Holics on Facebook, on Twitter. They're out there. Not only are they breaking some of this news just as fast as some of the other big dogs, they're putting fantasy relevancy with it right off the rip. So if you have one of these players that's still yet to fall and you want to be able to trade them and stuff, or you're thinking about should you try to trade for them, you get instant analysis from the Fantasy Holics page. Go on there, give those guys a follow. And obviously Brant and I will touch base on any other big moves that happen, by this time next week when we go live again. And I think, Brant, it's probably time to start talking a little bit about some incoming rookies. I'd like to do a running back position breakdown. This class is such a deep running back class. I think we need to get ahead of it. So that's coming in the next few weeks. I know we still want to talk about coaching changes as well at some point. So a lot on the menu for the Fatboyz.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited. I'm starting to get in it. Today kind of brought me back down as it got really slow on the first official day of actual free agency where you can actually put pen to paper. But you got some big names still out there. It's going to be interesting. Waiting to see if Seattle spends some of that money. I know that they put it into their defense, so that's been exciting to me. The DeMarcus Lawrence signing made me a little excited. I was out and about and it just came across my phone. I had to jump just a little bit, about a piece of paper's worth. But it does make me excited. So I'm excited for this offseason. Football is right around the corner. The draft is coming up. We're going to be live on day one of the draft, like always. Hopefully get some special guests to jump in. If any of you guys want to put your analysis in on some of these picks, join us live on day one of the draft. We'll go live probably about 15, 20 minutes before the first pick hits the stands. It's always fun. It's always fun to go back and forth. It's long episodes. You definitely get
4 hours.
You definitely get to watch the Fatboyz eat some food because, well, we got to stay awake and that keeps us busy going. And but it's always a good night. But I think that wraps it up for the free agency frenzy for the Fatboyz. So as always, stay hungry,
stay fat, my friends.